For nearly 20 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban looked like the perfect match. Hollywood elegance meets Nashville charm. But now that fairy tale has collapsed. Nicole has finally filed for divorce after 19 years, and shocking new details are spilling out. Sources say she fought to save the marriage, but now she's done staying silent. And after Keith's strange post-split performance, no ring, no love songs, and bitter lyric changes, fans are asking the same question. What did Nicole just expose? Stay with us to find out. Before their lives intertwined in a whirlwind Hollywood meets Nashville romance, both Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had walked very different and deeply complicated roads that would ultimately shape the love story to come. Nicole Kidman was born in Honolulu in 1967 to Australian parents temporarily living abroad. When she was a child, her family returned to Sydney where she grew up in a strict but ambitious household. Shy and soft-spoken, she often blushed when called on in class. Yet behind that timidity was a vivid imagination. Acting became her refuge. Ballet lessons led to drama school. And by her teens she was performing in youth theatre. As Australia's film industry blossomed, Nicole's talent stood out. Roles in television films and the 1983 cult hit BMX Bandits marked her early rise. Hollywood soon came calling. By the late 1980s, she was on the path to stardom, and it was then she met Tom Cruise. They married in 1990, becoming one of Hollywood's most famous couples. But behind the glamour, their marriage was strained by Tom's deep ties to Scientology. When it ended in 2001, Nicole lost not only her husband, but also primary custody of their adopted children, Isabella and Connor, a heartbreak that left her feeling excluded from their lives. That loss shaped her deeply and fueled her longing for the stable family she later hoped to build with Keith Urban. Keith Urban, born the same year in Whangar, New Zealand, had his own turbulent beginnings. Raised in Queensland, Australia, he inherited his father's love for country music and picked up the guitar at 6. While music gave him purpose, his home life was fraught with financial stress and emotional tension. He dropped out of school to chase his dream, performing in bars and competitions across Australia. By his 20s, fame and addiction collided. Success in Nashville came with his 1999 self-titled album. But behind the spotlight was a man fighting demons. Charismatic yet restless, Keith had already been to rehab more than once by the time he met Nicole in 2005. A meeting that would change both of their lives. Two worlds collide. On the surface, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban couldn't have been more different. She was Hollywood royalty. He was Nashville grit. But beneath the fame, both carried deep scars. Nicole bore the pain of lost motherhood and betrayal while Keith wrestled with addiction and the fear of self-destruction. When they met, both were at turning points. Nicole had just rebuilt her life after divorce and won an Oscar for The Hours. Keith was rising fast in country music, but unraveling behind the scenes. Their connection felt faded. Two wounded souls finding comfort in each other. Yet what felt like destiny would later reveal itself as volatility. Her need for stability clashed with his restless spirit. For Nicole, he was a chance to rebuild a family. For Keith, she was both his anchor and his mirror. Their meeting in 2005 wasn't fate. It was a collision of two fragile worlds that would define the next 2 decades. Crossing paths and fairy tale romance. When Nicole and Keith finally met at the 2005 G-Day USA Gala in Los Angeles, it seemed like a storybook beginning. Two Australian stars, both survivors of heartbreak, finding love when they least expected it. Nicole, newly independent and already an Oscar winner, radiated grace. Keith, the charming Nashville star, was just breaking into the mainstream. She later admitted she thought he wasn't interested. He didn't call for months after their first meeting, but when he finally did, everything changed. Their romance escalated quickly. By that summer, they were inseparable, and by year's end, Nicole called him the man who swept her off her feet. To her, Keith represented passion and freedom, everything her past marriage had lacked. To him, She was elegance, stability, and the legitimacy he'd long craved. In June 2006, barely a year after they met, they married in a candle-lit ceremony in Sydney's Manly Peninsula. Surrounded by family and stars, they looked like the perfect couple, Australia's golden pair. Nicole had found a man who seemed to love her without control, and Keith had found redemption in her arms. But as they would soon discover, even fairy tales come with cracks. The first cracks. Just 4 months after their wedding, Keith Urban checked himself into rehab for alcohol abuse. A devastating blow to what had seemed like a fairy tale beginning. Nicole Kidman, still glowing from the honeymoon phase, suddenly found herself standing by her new husband in crisis. The tabloids painted her as the savior and him as the broken artist. For Keith, the relapse was humiliating. For Nicole, it became a test of loyalty. She refused to let the public see her falter, visiting him quietly and shielding their marriage from gossip. Later, Keith would credit her with saving his life. But those close to the couple saw something deeper. Nicole, who had once lost control of her first marriage, now poured herself into the role of protector, determined to save what she couldn't before. Their loyalty to each other became the defining feature of their marriage. As the years passed, they rebuilt their image, the devoted actress, and the redeemed musician. Nicole balanced major films like Australia and Rabbit Hole, while Keith became one of country music's biggest stars. Publicly, they were affectionate and united. She called him the man who brought her back to life, and he often wept thanking her on stage. But behind the smiles, the cracks deepened. His career meant long tours. Hers meant filming overseas. They promised never to spend more than a few weeks apart, a rule often broken. Nicole, still haunted by losing her adopted children with Tom Cruise, clung tightly to family life after the births of daughters Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret. Keith loved his children deeply, but struggled to balance fatherhood with fame's demands. To the public, they seemed unbreakable. But privately, Keith's battle for sobriety, Nicole's need for control, and their clashing temperaments created quiet distance. For nearly 20 years, they kept up the illusion. The reformed bad boy and his steadfast savior, not realizing that the same whirlwind that once united them would eventually pull them apart. Love under pressure. By their 10th anniversary, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had already survived more than most couples ever do. Rehab just months after the wedding, constant separations for work, and the strain of raising 2 daughters under the glare of fame. 4 years, they remained Hollywood's symbol of resilience. But behind that polished image, the pressure was quietly building. By the mid-2000s, whispers of tension began to surface. There were reports of arguments about Keith's nightlife, conflicting schedules, and Nicole's intensity. They denied everything, smiling for cameras and calling each other stronger than ever. But friends close to them saw the truth. Nicole was exhausted from being the steady one, while Keith was tired of feeling like her project rather than her partner. What once bound them together began to drive them apart. She loved his vulnerability but feared it. He admired her strength but resented living in its shadow. Their marriage became a balancing act between love and fatigue, devotion and frustration. Yet to the public, they remained the perfect couple, proof that love could conquer fame, addiction, and distance. Behind closed doors, though, the illusion was hard to sustain. Nicole and Keith had become prisoners of their own fairy tale. Even parenting revealed their differences. She preferred structure and protection, while he leaned toward freedom and fun. They weren't explosive fights, just quiet divides, the kind that slowly wear away at even the strongest love, the tabloid murmurs, and the slow unraveling. As the 2020s unfolded, whispers about trouble in Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage grew louder. Tabloids hinted at distance, arguments, and the return of Keith's old struggles. Publicly, the couple pushed back, appearing together at events, smiling for cameras, and insisting all was well. Nicole, calm and composed, would tell reporters, "We've never been stronger." But behind those words, cracks were forming. Keith was still fighting to stay sober. Though his relapses were behind him, Nicole's fear of losing him to addiction never truly faded. Her watchfulness, once a form of love, began to feel like control. To him, it was suffocating, as though he was being judged, even when he was doing everything right. To her, it was exhaustion, the weariness of always being the one holding everything together. Privately, they were drifting apart. Publicly, they performed closeness. Their red carpet appearances became almost theatrical. His hand gripping hers tightly, her smile flawless yet distant. The gestures were familiar, the affection convincing. But to those who looked closely, it was clear. The fairy tale was being kept alive more out of habit than harmony. Every marriage carries unspoken resentments, and over time theirs became too heavy to ignore. Nicole Kidman reportedly grew weary of always being the strong one, the wife, the mother, and the savior holding everything together. Keith Urban, meanwhile, bristled under her control, her calm precision in managing their lives, their image, and even him. Friends described their relationship as a constant balancing act. He longed for freedom. She longed for security. He sought passion. She sought peace. Neither was wrong, but they were rarely in rhythm. By 2023, the whispers had turned into headlines. Insiders claimed they were living separate lives, still married, but emotionally distant. The signs were there. Nicole appearing alone at premieres. Keith touring without his wedding ring. Both avoided questions about each other, still insisting publicly that marriage takes work. Yet, their words began to sound less like conviction and more like routine. By the summer of 2025, the illusion had finally worn thin. Nicole focused on her daughters, retreating from public life while Keith poured his heart into his music. His performances raw, almost confessional. Those close to them said there was no final blow-up, no scandal, just quiet exhaustion. Nicole realized she could no longer be both partner and caretaker. Keith admitted he could no longer meet the weight of her expectations. When Nicole filed for divorce that September, citing irreconcilable differences, the world was shocked. But those paying attention saw it coming. After nearly 2 decades of love, struggle, and survival, their story ended not in chaos, but in inevitability. What followed wasn't just a breakup. It was the unmasking of a marriage that had been quietly breaking for years. After 19 years of marriage, 2 daughters, and nearly 2 decades of public devotion, Nicole Kidman finally walked away. Those close to her said the decision had not come easily. She agonized for months, torn between saving her family and saving herself. 4 years, she had been the steady one, the planner, the anchor, the protector in a marriage often defined by Keith Urban's volatility. But eventually, even her strength had limits. As one friend put it, she realized she couldn't save both the marriage and herself. The divorce documents made her intentions clear. Nicole sought primary custody of their daughters, Sunday and Faith, with Keith sharing joint decision-making authority. Both waived spousal and child support, a sign their finances had long been separate. Her filing was quiet, deliberate, and dignified. But Keith's reaction was anything but. Just days after the news broke, he appeared in public without his wedding ring. Then came his Pennsylvania concert, his first since the split, where the music became a raw public confession.